Thank you to everyone who has joined us this evening as well. As Rich said, my name is Loren Bohlen, and I work in the Special Education Office at the New York City Department of Education. I see already some very friendly names out there. So again, thank you so much for joining this evening. Tonight's session is actually a follow-up to the session that we had about a month ago on how the graduation requirements have changed this year due to the transition to remote learning because of COVID-19. Excuse me. So we collectively decided that a follow-up is needed because the state issued a memo on May 27th with some new information. For those of you who were not able to join that night, we will do a very quick review, but also I want to mention that Include NYC always posts these sessions that they have. And so when you do go to their website, you will be able to access everything from that evening, I believe. But in addition, just as a little reminder, we did talk about the fact that Regents exams are canceled this year for both June and August, and that for students working toward a CDOS credential, they do not have to complete the number of hours that are typically required for CTE or for work-based learning. So this means that if your student was planning to take a Regents exam and passes the course, they will be exempt from that Regents exam, and it will count as a 65 for purposes of graduation decisions, even though that doesn't actually appear on the transcript. And all of this, by the way, is true for students with and without disabilities or IEPs. All of the safety nets that are typically in effect for students with IEPs are still in effect. We're not going to go over them this evening, but I will say that if you want more general information about graduation requirements, there are 3 places that you can go for that information. Definitely the New York City Department of Education website has information on graduation requirements, in addition to changes that have happened for this year. We try to keep it updated. It may not be completely updated with tonight's information yet, though. New York State website has all of the memos that have come out. So if you want to see them as a first-hand resource and with all of the regulatory language, you can always go to nysed.gov. All of the COVID-19 information is there, along with the recent memos regarding graduation requirements. And of course, the Include NYC website and hotline are available to everyone, as Rich mentioned. So what we are going to talk about this evening is the May 27th memo. This memo states that if your child is exempt from a Regents exam, you actually have a choice. You can accept that exemption or you can decline it. If you don't accept the exemption, or in other words, if you decline it, then that means that your child would still have to pass the Regents next year in order to get a diploma when it is given in the future. So at this point, we're assuming the testing is likely going to be back in effect next year, although of course we definitely have learned that anything can happen. But for the purposes of this discussion, that's definitely the safest assumption to make, and we can see why this is the case as we continue to dig into the memo a little bit. The next important thing to note is that if your child has an IEP and they've been planning to come back to school in the fall for a 5th or 6th year, but now they're eligible for a diploma, they're eligible to graduate with a diploma because of the exemptions, then you must let the school know that you want your child to receive the diploma. This is very important. If you don't let the school know that you want your child to receive the diploma, and they were planning to come back next year, even if they're eligible to receive that diploma, the school is not going to be able to issue it until they hear from you. So if this applies to you, if you have a child who was planning previously to come back to school in the fall, but now, because of the Regents exemptions and other exemptions that are in place, they're actually eligible to graduate with a diploma, then you should have received an email from your child's school. If you think that your child fits that description, that they were planning to come back, but now they're eligible because of the exemptions to graduate, and you did not receive an email or any communication about this from your child's school, then I would definitely recommend that you reach out to their school. It's very important to do so, so that you can find out if this applies to your child or not. So we're going to look at your options a little bit more closely now. I'm going to share my screen for a few minutes, and I'm sure that's going to go very smoothly. So just give me one little moment to do that. And here we go. You don't really need to look at me the whole time. Okay, so hopefully you can see this. I'm gonna, yeah. What I did was I pulled out part of the email that you should have received if this applies to your child, so that we can look at it together. And also, this was part of the resource that was sent to everybody who's participating in both English and Spanish. So you have the bigger document that I pulled this out of. If you don't have it, then we can definitely make sure that you get it, but I believe it was sent to everybody who's on the call right now. But I wanted to share it, with all of us looking at it together for a minute. Anyway, even though you have it, so that we can talk about it together. So when you receive the email, and it likely will be in the form of an email if the school has an email address for you. If they don't, then we can talk about other options. But if they do, then you would have received an email, and within the email, these 4 options are delineated. So if, again, this is if you have a child who is now eligible to graduate because of the exemptions that are currently in place. So they were going to take a Regents, but now they don't have to because the Regents exams were canceled. And so because of those exemptions, your child is now eligible to graduate, even though previously you thought that they were going to be coming back to school in the fall. That's the group of students that we're talking about. So again, you should have received an email if your child, if what I just described applies to your child. And in the email, the first option that you can choose is accept all waivers. And if you choose accept all waivers, that means that you're accepting the Regents waivers for your student, for your child, and that you understand that that means that they will graduate once they've earned all of their course credits. And then it goes on to suggest that you let them know your decision by replying to the email by writing, I accept all waivers. So it's just reinforcing the fact that all students still need 44 credits to graduate. They still have to pass their class, but they are exempt from any of the Regents or the number of hours that were required for any of the CDOS, and that you can accept those waivers. And what that means is that assuming that they pass their classes and they get their credits, they will get a diploma. They will graduate with a diploma. Option 2 is decline all waivers. And what that means is that whatever waivers are in effect, could be in effect for your child because they were planning to take whichever Regents they were planning to take, you're basically saying, I don't want the Regents exams or CDOS requirements waived for my child. And what that means and to let them know your selection by responding to the email with, I decline all waivers. So it's really important to understand the bullet points that are under option 2. What that means, if you choose decline all waivers, is that your child will not graduate this year, and that they will be eligible to return to school until they're 21, and that in order to receive a diploma in the future, they will have to pass the Regents exam. So the waivers are only in effect, as far as we know, for this year, for June and August. And so that's why I was saying it's really important to make the assumption that in the future there will be testing again at some point, because if you do decline the waiver and you want your child to go back to school in the fall, then they will have to meet all of the graduation requirements that had previously been in effect before COVID-19. And that does include passing all of the Regents required to get a diploma. So that's important to note. Option 3 is to accept some waivers. So if your child was going to graduate this year, or try to take more than one Regents exam, rather, not graduate. They were planning to come back, but they were taking more than one Regents exam. And you can decide to decline some but not all of the Regents waivers for your child. And you know, in that case, even though the bullet points are not there, again, it's really important to note that if you decline even one of the waivers, that your child will not be getting a diploma, and they will have to come back in the fall and pass that particular test, whichever one you declined. They will have to pass that test in the future. So if that is your decision, then you would respond to the email by writing, I accept some waivers, and you could call your school to discuss which ones you want to accept and which ones you want to decline. And then finally, option 4, which is extremely understandable under these circumstances, is undecided. So if you're not sure what to do, it says that you would like to meet with a school staff member to discuss this decision, and to let the school know that that's what you want to do. Respond to the email by writing, I am not sure. Again, that would be very understandable. I do recommend that if you have any questions about this at all, you reach out to your child's school, and that's because every child's situation obviously is unique to that child. And so, you know, you have to make the best decision together with your student that you can make for them. This is an opportunity for some students to graduate using the waivers, but the state wanted to be clear that there is choice involved and that you can decline some or all waivers if that's what you choose to do. So I'm going to unshare my screen right now, now that we've all looked at these 4 options together. And then I'm just going to reinforce one important thing that I think we briefly touched upon before, but it's really important to reiterate. And that is that if your child, again, these are all ifs. So if your child was planning to come back in the fall, but now they're eligible to graduate because of the waivers that are in effect this year, and the school does not hear from you, they are not able to issue your child that diploma if your child has an IEP. So they really need to hear from you in order to issue the diploma. And they're going to plan for you to come back in the fall, for your child to come back, excuse me, if they don't hear from you. So I just want to make that very clear. It's super important to be able to reach out to your child's school to talk to them about this. So with that, let me see, I'm sure that I missed lots. I stopped looking at my notes. So let me just double check that I didn't miss anything really important. Um, I don't think I did. Yeah, just reinforcing that if you do think this might apply to you, but you haven't heard from your child's school, it's really important to reach out to them to find out if it applies to you or not. Looking at the questions, so there is a question about whether or not there's an update on students who are aging out in June and whether there are going to be extra services provided for these students. And I will say to that, because I know that there's been a lot of conversation about that, and there's been a lot of advocacy for some kind of extension of services for students who are due to age out this year because of the COVID-19 remote learning situation that we're all in. But we do not yet, again, anything can happen, and we might be right back here next week talking about an update for this. But as of right now, at this moment, there has not been guidance from the state regarding that. So there is no update. What I can say is that we are looking, to be able to increase the transition services that we're providing through our transition centers. And they are located in each borough. They're actually Transition and College Access Centers, TCAC for short. And we can post the information for each of the TCACs. And if there are students who are due to age out because they're 21 years old this year, and for whatever reason, for very good reasons, I'm sure, their post-secondary plans are not fully in effect yet. We know that some organizations, shut down for a little bit and weren't accepting applications. Colleges moved their deadlines back. There was some confusion a little bit with deadlines for the FAFSA, the financial aid form. So there's been a lot going on this year. So if there are students who are exiting from high school this year and who really need help with that transition, the TCACs will be open this summer, and we really encourage you to use them because even if it's remotely, we want to meet, and we're still working that part out too. We know about the executive order that came down Friday night, but even if it is remotely, then, we really want to meet with families and students and make sure that everybody has a post-secondary plan in place, and we will help with those linkages, whenever needed. So that much I can tell you, but definitely we'll keep you posted as if we hear anything further about the 21-year-olds. Let's see. Susan, that was a long-winded response, sorry. So there is a pre-K question, and I will say that our focus here is high school students. So I would just recommend that you talk to your team about that. Yeah, and there's another question about 21-year-olds. So everything that I just said applies to that as well. There is a middle school question. Let's see. If the student passed a class in middle school but did not achieve passing the Regents exam, living environment, or algebra, there are definitely middle schoolers who take Regents level classes. And actually, if I'm reading this correctly, and again, I'm going to say individual student situations, I'm really happy to discuss or to have you email me to my work email, which I will also post, because sometimes there are nuances with students' transcript reviews and I hate to answer a question without having all of the information, and I don't think you can really post all of it in here. But I will say that the exemption does apply to 8th graders. So if that's helpful, which sounds like is part of this question, that it does apply to any Regents level exam, and that if you look in the guidance document, the first one, not the May 27th issued one, but the one that we talked about last month, there is a Q&A after that, that's part of that document. And one of the questions is specifically around the middle school issue. So we can make sure to post that document as well, the one that we gave out last time, and see if that helps. And if not, definitely you can email me and I'll make sure that you get the correct information. Let's see if any new questions have come in. Oh, so there's an interesting question. What if my child passed all the Regents? Do we still need to fill out this waiver? So no, it doesn't apply to past Regents exams. The reason for the waiver is because the Regents are actually waived right now, which means nobody is taking any Regents this June or August, and that's the waiver. So any Regents that your child has passed previously, those grades stand. This is only relevant for right now because of COVID-19. Oh, that's a great question. I mean, these are all great questions. But somebody asked if there's a deadline for when families need to respond by, and what happens if they don't respond at all? Will they not have the chance to use the waiver in the future? There is no set deadline for responding, but so anytime up until the new school year, you can still respond. What the state guidance actually says is that the school needs to keep trying to reach you until they get a response. So even if they don't reach you, by June 26th, they should keep trying, because it's really important to find out from you whether or not you want your child to graduate this year. And by doing so, that you're accepting the waivers that are in effect. That's the most important thing, is that you communicate with the school. So there actually is not a set deadline for that, but obviously once your child is back in school in September, that would be the deadline, because then they're back in school already. Yeah, so there is another great question. My daughter is short just a few credits, so she's actually not eligible to graduate right now because of the waivers, but she can finish the credits over the summer and be awarded then. So should she accept the waivers? I say yes, because that way, as soon as she gets those credits, she will be eligible to graduate. So that is something that I would recommend you do take advantage of, if that's what you want. If she's working so hard to graduate, and she's going to school in the summer to finish those credits so that she can graduate, you would accept those waivers, because then she will not have to worry about any August Regents either, because those are also waived. So that's an important question. So there is another question, that can a student attending a high school inclusion program who doesn't complete the 44 credit requirement by June have the option to return? Yes, if they're not 21 years old yet, and they have not met graduation requirements, then they absolutely have the option to return to school. I would discuss the summer school part of the question. I would discuss that with your child's school to see what's going to be available and what they recommend about summer school. I know people are working feverishly right now on what the summer school program is going to look like. There is another question about the deadline, and I just want to clarify that again because this question asks it in a slightly different way. So it is true, like I said, that the guidelines do not state a deadline. They don't say that we must hear back from parents by this date in order to proceed. That's not what they say. In fact, I have it right here, so I'm going to read it to you, what it actually says. One moment. So there's, again, like their other document, there's a little Q&A at the end. And what it says, of course, my papers are out of order. Sorry. So what it says is, boy, I apologize. So how long can the school delay the conferral of the diploma? The school can delay the conferral of the diploma as long as necessary and proceed with plans to continue the student's education in the following year. And it says, what happens if you what happens if the parent cannot be contacted in order to express his or her desire to have the child graduate? And the answer to that is the school must delay the conferral of such diploma until the parent is contacted and confirms that the child is to receive the diploma. So that's the language from the state FAQ. So that's why I'm saying that there's no actual deadline, but it would be really important to talk to your child's school about it. Because the bottom line is, look, we all want to do what's best for our children. And if your child is eligible for a diploma, and somebody else here asked, are there pros and cons for each option? I mean, you have to think about it, obviously. But if your child is eligible to receive a diploma, and there's a chance that if they come back to school in the fall, it will be very challenging for them to receive a diploma, then that's really something to consider when making this decision. I'm just looking, sorry, to see if it looks like there's a couple of more questions. So that's these are all great questions. Some of them are, again, I'm going to post my email because I know that there's a lot of individual situations and nuances to this. Will the emails from the schools specify which regions have the possibility of being waived? That's an interesting question because the example that the state sent down actually, had spaces for the parents to write in which regions. And I don't think most parents, I know I didn't, keep track of exactly which regions my kids were taking each time necessarily. So unless it's kind of a school decision, whether they fill that in for you or not. If it does not, most of them probably won't say which regions. So if it doesn't, then, and you're interested in which regions your child was going to take, I would just pick up the phone or email whatever contact you have at the school. And I'm sure they'll be happy to discuss it with you and to go over which regions your child was planning to take this year. There's another question that if the student is not passing their class this year, but did in a prior year, so they're repeating the class, can they qualify for the Regents exemption? If it's a Regents level class, then yes, it doesn't, and they are repeating the class right now, they do qualify for the Regents. The answer is, I mean, for the Regents exemption, excuse me. So the answer is yes. And then what do they want to see as intent to take Regents? That's another area that's a little bit tricky, because in the previous memo, the one that we talked about last time, we talked about the fact that in addition to being currently enrolled in a Regents level class, you can also be eligible for a waiver if there's some knowledge that you were planning to take the Regents even if you're not currently in the class. So for that same example, if you took the Regents in the past and you didn't pass it, but you passed the class, so you don't have to take the class again. You just have to take the Regents exam. Then somebody at the school hopefully knew that the student was planning to take the Regents this year so that they can be eligible for the exemption. But again, that would be something to discuss with the school. If your child was taking any kind of prep or had any indication that they were planning to do the Regents, spoke to the guidance counselor about it, definitely talk to somebody at your school to see if they can be eligible for the waiver this year. Let's see. I'm just looking to see if there's a question that is different than the ones that we've talked about so far. If a child is eligible to graduate using safety net scoring, opt to stay in high school for a 5th or 6th year, even without using the Regents waiver. I'm not sure what that's asking. But I will say that the safety nets are still in effect. The 65 that we spoke about for the exemption, the Regents that we're not taking this year, is only used for graduation decisions. And so that actually does not get averaged in any way. So it doesn't count in that compensatory safety net formula. If you need some higher grades and some lower grades on Regents, it does not count towards that. And it also does not bring you down if you're going for an advanced Regents diploma. It's just used for graduation decisions. Okay, got it. So clarification on one of those questions, it was if a child opts to stay for a 5th or 6th year, but they're actually eligible to graduate because of the safety nets. So typically when a student is eligible to graduate, then they graduate, yeah. And so that hasn't really changed this year, that part of it. Yeah. Let's see if there are additional questions here. Some students are very close to graduation in these questions and have a couple more credits to go, passed some Regents, failed some Regents. And so I'm sure there are other students in that same boat as this particular person who asked the question. So if we accept the exemptions, then does that mean that the student, again, this is similar to the previous one, the student will not be able to stay in school until they're 21 years old. And it is true that what normally happens is that once you receive your diploma, then FAPE ends and you graduate with your diploma. There have been, yeah, it's a case-by-case basis if there's ever an exception to that, but basically that's what typically happens, and those are the regulatory requirements. And I think, let's see, I'm trying to see if I missed any. If I did, because it's a little tricky to answer all of the questions while I'm reading them and trying to make sure that I'm addressing as many as possible. So I will say that if I missed questions, Rich is going to post my email as well, which is lbohlen2@schools.nyc.gov. And if you do have an issue that you want to raise, or you do have a question about this that you want to put forth to our office, you can also always email the special education inbox, which is just that. It's special education at schools.nyc.gov. And that goes all year round. If you ever have a question and you're not sure where to go or how to get the answer, you can definitely always email special education at schools, and somebody at the other end of that will respond quickly and will work hard to get you the answers that you need. So I definitely want to advocate for doing that as well. And like I said, the TCACs will be open, and we can make sure that you get that information as well. It's also on our public website. So definitely feel free to go to schools.nyc.gov, and you'll be able to find some information about our transition and college access centers. And thank you. And do feel free, like I said, to reach out, because I know this is a challenging time for everyone. I just want to acknowledge that. And so I hope we can just take a deep breath and move forward and do everything we can collectively to help our children succeed and map out their post-secondary plans, because I know that's what we all want. Thank you.